Jin Shin Jyutsu,
we can just take our fingers and touch in. Oh, there we go. See how she likes that?
which translates into the creator's art through the person of knowing and compassion.
The Japanese practice of healing with your fingertips.
No one knows how old it is. It's an ancient healing art.
We learn how to use our hands, where to put them. We learn about the locations in the body. That can be me as a practitioner. That can be you working with the animals in your surroundings. And that can be us working on ourselves. I'm going to put my hand somewhere that I think may help you, if you're ready, to move through. Not to forget, because we never forget. Our traumatic experiences are also our teachers, right? We teach how to hold the fingers related to our strong or stuck emotions, attitudes. That is extremely powerful. Two wires close together, the energy travels between, right, before they even touch. Light touch, lay it in your lap, however you're comfortable. It helps with worry, and worry we know affects digestion. And the touch that we use for the animals like simple. The animals don't need a big step-by-step. We don't have to appear busy. They shift and change quicker than we do. They have many less layers on them. One of my favorite things, if I could teach people anything, I would teach
Welcome back to Twisted Reality, where we explore the deeper layers of human experience, holistic healing, and the unseen forces that shape our lives. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Jennifer Bradley, an authorized Jin Shin Jyutsu practitioner and self-help instructor. Her journey into this powerful healing modality started in 2003 when she witnessed firsthand the profound impact it had on her family's well-being. Since then, she has dedicated her life to bringing this ancient energy practice into hospitals, animal shelters, and even prisons, helping us find physical, emotional, and spiritual balance. Jennifer, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. You know, it's this world is so amazing right now that we can connect here between Kentucky, which is sort of a spiritual center, though people don't know it, here in the United States, and India, which has been a center of spiritual life for lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes.
I'd love to start with the journey into Jin Shin Jyutsu. I think part of my audience will not even be familiar, because I was not familiar, because I discovered you and I seen how you work with animals, which then led me to work with our dog. And I saw the changes quite quickly. Immediately, I felt like they calmed down when I used the techniques that you share. So I would just love to hear from you, like, what is Jin Shin Jyutsu, and then the story that brought you there.
Sure. Thank you. So Jin Shin Jyutsu is an ancient art. There is some technique to it. We learn how to use our hands, where to put them. Mm-hmm. We learn about the locations in the body. I won't go deeply into that right now. But it is innate in every culture. It is natural to all of us, but it was written down in Japan. So the gentleman who started studying and researching this came up with the name. He changed the name many, many times, but the final name he came to was Jin Shin Jyutsu, and which translates into the creator's art through the person of knowing and compassion. So that can be me as a practitioner, that can be you working with the animals in your surroundings, and that can be us working on ourselves, because it's so important for us to be loving and compassionate to ourselves as well. So we can talk more deeply about that later, but to tell you a bit of my story, I didn't come from this world at all. I was a very healthy eater, healthy lifestyle, knew how to take good care of my body, but I hadn't and was not reticent about any sort of complementary type therapy. I hadn't had a lot of use of doctors. I've been in good health, but I come from a line of doctors. I'm not a doctor myself. But back in 2003, I was a caregiver for my mother-in-law going through cancer. She had lung cancer and brain tumor metastasis. And at the same time, my sister was diagnosed with breast cancer. And she had all the traditional care. She was in California with an oncologist in UC San Francisco. And he offered, or that practice, because it was men and women, offered a free service for their patients. And that was that, along with the chemotherapy, a few days later, they could have experience acupuncture or Jin Shin Jyutsu. And this was told to them that it would be to assist with the side effects of chemotherapy. So nausea, exhaustion, appetite, mental, emotional well-being. And so my sister said, I don't want to have anything more to do with needles. I've had plenty of that. And she decided to try this thing she had never heard of. And my mother was taking her at the time, and she would call me and say, I don't know what this is that she's doing, but I take her to this office. She's, not feeling well. She's, she looks down. Her color is poor. People dealing with these illnesses can get an ashen sort of tone to their skin. We look at all of that in Jin Shin Jyutsu, but, and she would wait for her, and when she came out, she looked completely different. Her attitude was different. She might be hungry. She might like to go for a walk. She just really was significantly different. So my sister was doing this, and my mom just kept reporting. So I was primary caregiver for my mother-in-law on her cancer experience, and it was a very spiritual journey. That could be a whole nother podcast. But I thought she was getting ready to have her second brain tumor removal. It was a metastasis. She survived the first one, and I just had this inner knowing that she wasn't going to make it if we didn't do something. And came to find out from her later on, she felt the same too, but of course I wasn't going to bring that up. I think you're going to die on the table. So I thought to myself, I've got to do something. What can we do? And I thought, I wonder whatever that thing is that I can't pronounce, that I don't understand, if maybe it will help her. So I got on, my computer. And of course, now that people have heard this, they're going to spell it, and they'll go out there and they'll start looking, and there's lots and lots of information. You'll be, how did I never stumble upon this? But this is what happens. People stumble across this art. And what popped up was a spreadsheet with a phone number of a woman who lives about an hour from me here in a bigger city, Louisville. And I convinced my mother-in-law to go for this thing. I didn't know what it was, but she agreed to go. And I took her. I sat in on the session, and this is what a session consists of. Clothes on, you remove your shoes, you lie on your back or however you're comfortable. We can work in wheelchairs or seated, hospital beds. But she was lying on a padded massage table, covered with a blanket. The woman listened to her wrist. She's actually still my practitioner, as you do in traditional Chinese medicine. This doesn't tell you what's wrong with you. It tells you what your body's doing to come into balance, or what the medical community calls homeostasis. And that was where she started after talking to her a bit. It's very quiet, very silent. I sat nearby because I thought, well, I want to watch. I got so dozy and relaxed. It's like the energy of the room, it just permeates, because this is the creator's art. It's coming through us. It is not us. And we can have a conversation about that, how there's different types of practices. And when my mother-in-law, when we finished, or she finished, I kind of came to, she felt completely different. She looked like her real self, her true self. She is very funny, kind of glamorous. She was sort of a Hollywood actress from the 40s. And she was back. It was like she was back. So what was that about? You know, so we continued to go see her. She did have the tumor removed. She came home. She made a decision. Well, I was in there. I'll tell you a story. I was in there with her one time, and I heard this, people will talk about this big booming voice. I don't know where it's from. It was from within me. And it said, no more doctors. And I thought, what the heck do I do with that? I didn't have a spiritual practice at the time. I study and look at everything. I wouldn't call myself a Christian. I wouldn't call, if anything else, I follow Meher Baba, who you see in the back there from India. But at that time, I wasn't. But I thought, oh my gosh, what do I do with this? So I did nothing. And she ultimately decided fairly quickly that she was not going to pursue any more traditional medicine. And she was told that she would live like 6 weeks with a terrible, horrendous, they described the most horrendous death for her. That was very nice of them, by the way. My mother-in-law picked up her little handbag and turned and looked at the oncologist, the psychologist, the whole team that they had amassed, and said, darlings, that simply doesn't apply to me. And she got up and she left, and I went, guess we're leaving. So we went into palliative care, and she did have some pain, but she finished up. I watched her do all kinds of things, finish up things in her life. She went and continued treatment with this practitioner. And when she would have head pain, the woman told me that I could hold her big toes with my thumbs, just like a little jumper cable. And so I was with her constantly. She had some caregivers, but my children, my husband, we were there all the time. She lived independently. She did not want to move in with us, though she spent a ton of time with us. So I could do that. And of course she would have pain meds, but this would help that pain in the head faster than any pain medication until the day before she died. And that day, I did this, and she would usually she'd tell me, that's enough, that's enough, that's enough. It was so strong. Holding down at the feet pulls the energy down. It's that inhale up the back, the exhale down the front, like a rocking chair. We see the story of energy movement everywhere in our lives. So that makes sense, right? Inhale, exhale. And we don't focus in a special breathing practice, by the way. But she could not get out of pain. So I said, Jess, we have to go to the hospital. Oftentimes people in cancer treatments, when they're having tremendous pain, they'll go in for like a readjustment of medications, get them stabilized, tweak some things and bring them out. So we were not in a hospice at that point for this. We didn't think she was at her end of her life. She was still pretty vital. And we went in, and she spent the evening with me. My husband was out of town, saying, I've got to go, I've got to go. And then she would lie down, and they did give her a bit of morphine. And then she'd get up and she would wander. So this went on all night. He came back the next morning. He went there. I went home to gather the kids because they wanted to see her. Of course, they wanted to stop for flowers, and we hit every single red light. And on the way there, he calls me. And he says the nurses, and you have to understand, we're not in hospice. We are in a regular medical facility. They said, her body is shutting down and she's getting ready to go. This is happening incredibly rapidly. And synchronistically, his brother, his sister are on an airplane coming to Kentucky just for a visit. This is all happening at once. And he said to me, I don't know what to do. And I said, stay by her side, hold her hand, tell her you love her. He was the eldest son. And do not leave her side. We will be there as quick as we can. Hitting traffic lights. 10 minutes later, I kid you not, she was gone. Took her last breath, which is always an exhale. So I thought that it was quite shocking, but I had plenty of time after that to think, what happened? What was that? And what I came to determine, and this I haven't changed in my thinking, she was in harmony. She was in balance. Her body was in alignment. I do not believe she left, that cancer took her life, because at that point they would do scans and the metastasis was gone. We had been doing lots and lots of Jin Shin Jyutsu. There was nothing in her lungs. There was nothing growing and going anywhere else. And I think she finished her life. And she was in such a state of balance that there wasn't the struggle. So that got my attention. And then after that, things started happening. Like I was on a playground, somebody fell and hit their head. I went over just to see if they were okay, put my hands on them, the kid would get up. And happened at a soccer game of my daughter's as well. And I finally went, okay, I don't know what this is, and I'm not a magical person. I don't have this great talent that anyone else doesn't have. I don't see auras, I think I'm just like a regular human. And I just said, okay, I will start studying this.
We'll be right back to the conversation in just a moment, so stay tuned. So a while back, my wife and me started experimenting with structured water, and I've got to say the results have been undeniable. We've noticed a clearer mind, more energy, and an overall sense of well-being that I didn't expect from something as simple as changing our water. And it's not just a feeling, science backs this up. Just to give you one example of one study that they've made is the impact on brain function. In the study, brain scans of a young woman showed that just 10 minutes after drinking analema water, her delta brainwaves shifted from below average coherence to normal, while her identical twin who drank regular water saw no change at all. That's the power of structured water at work. I only recommend what I've personally tested and found to work. If you want to try it yourself, check out the link in the description. Plus, use code SAVESOIL for 10% off as a thank you for supporting the channel. Now, back to the conversation.
I will start studying this. And so I started taking classes and practicing and working. And I did that for, probably about, until I was so about 5 years. And then I had learned enough that I thought I could open a little office. And so I had a part-time office. I shared a space with an acupuncturist and just started seeing people here and there. And just to kind of and then to learn more, I finagled my way, and these are these synchronistic things that happen, into hospice. I started working with hospice, and I told them, send me to see the people who are requesting massage, but their body is too fragile. And so I started working with those people. And then they would go into the hospital, like my mother-in-law, for pain adjustment, or near death. And I would treat them in the hospital and they would get back out. Most people don't leave hospitals. So the doctors started asking what I was doing and asked me if I could come regularly. So yeah, so I would meet with the doctors. They would tell me who had what going on. And there's a lot of different stories. So I learned a lot there. Not only about the physical aspect of the body, we weren't just thinking about pain. We were thinking about traumatic life, terrible accidents, injuries, fear of death. And so I learned a lot from that aspect. And then I just, I live from here these days. I try not to live from here. This will steer you wrong every time. So I heard in my heart one day, go work at the cancer center. Now, my mother-in-law worked within a cancer center in New York City because no one in Kentucky could help her with what she needed. So I went to our big cancer center here, and I kept calling, saying, I think I'm supposed to volunteer there. This is what I do. And, nobody wanted to talk to me. But then one day, I got a meeting, and it was with the woman who was the head of hospice, because by then I'd been working for hospice for a while. So she was the new head of palliative care there. I met with a nurse who was running the chemotherapy clinic where people receive infusions, and one other woman who I cannot remember who it was. And I told them about what I do. Of course, they looked at me like I was nuts. But the nurse from the chemo clinic said, I think I want to come see, I want to experience what you're doing. And I said, sure, come have a session in my office. So on a Saturday morning, she came, and we did a session. It was a rainy winter day, and we just did a session. So same thing, listen at the wrist, do, work with what I hear, light touch on the body. There's no massage, there's no pressure, there's no sending of energy. There's just wondering what's going to happen. And when she got off the table, she looked completely different. And she looked at me, and she said she'd had an experience where she felt this weight just completely lift off of her. And she felt just changed. And she went home, and she walked in the door, and her family looked at her and said, what happened to you? And then after that, she called me up and she said, you have to come work here. She arranged everything so I could volunteer. And then she quit her job and she divorced her husband, and she started a new life. And this isn't unusual. This does happen from time to time. Is it me? Do I have some inner knowing? No. My understanding, my experience and your experience are completely different. I'm not privy to everything. Or as I say to people, I'm not a psychic. That's not my job. I'm just touching and the energy is sparking. My hands are literally like a jumper cable on your car battery, just like yours are on your dog. You have every bit of the ability that I do. And with your animals, perhaps more, because you have a deeper connection. So I started working at the infusion center. I would go 2 hours in the morning. I'd go to the hospice wing of the other hospital. Then I'd come over and I'd see those people. Then I would come have a little bite to eat, and then I'd go over to the infusion center, and they would just guide me to people. And oftentimes I'd see people at the beginning. First time they'd had chemo, it makes you very nervous. I had people with tremendous pain, and this was really helping them. And they would report back to their oncologist doctors how different they were feeling. So finally, the head of the cancer center asked me to come in. He wanted to understand what was going on. What was I doing? He thought I was giving hand massages. So this is not massage. So I explained what it was. I told him a little bit, I only had, he'd given me 20 minutes for our meeting. He was very succinct. He was a very busy man. We spoke for 45. And they had an integrative medicine program. It's here at the University of Kentucky. They tried integrative medicine. They spent $250,000. They moved people out of offices so they could start with Reiki and massage and a number of different practices. No one came. No one could afford to pay. The doctors were frustrated because they didn't believe that this would be helpful. There was a lot of animosity, and the money was spent and lost. But he believed that there was, especially after seeing what was happening with me, that this was a path forward for the center. And he said, so at the end of our visit, he's like, well, I'm really glad you're doing what you're doing. He said, but can you just shoot me an email and give me some thoughts, like how might we try this again? So I went home and I thought, opportunity. Sometimes these opportunities are put in your hands. So I sat down, it took me a week or so. I wrote him an entire integrative medicine program. I wrote him a program. I wrote how we would address these different issues, how we would work with the physicians, how we would work with the patients, how we would create awareness. And I then did a budget for what it would take to start an office. And I said, we're just going to start with one. We're going to start with me because it's the only thing I know. So I wrote a budget, how much the materials are, and I wrote myself a job description and a salary. Why not? So I sent it off. Didn't hear anything. Then about 6 weeks later, his admin sent me a message and said, can you send that information again? So I sent it again, and he applied for a grant. And he got it from our Lexington Cancer Foundation. They privately raise funds for different things that people experiencing cancer need. Help with travel, help with food, help with all kinds of different things, helping in our area. And he got it. And so it was for me to come 20 hours a week, paid for the materials, but it only would last 1 year. And the condition was I had to prove myself. I had to prove to them that this was actually helping people. So I came up with, there's another center in New Jersey, in Morristown, that had, at the time, 40 Jin Shin Jyutsu practitioners on staff working all over the hospital. Probably only place in the nation that was working that way. They still have a program, not quite as robust, but they had a sheet that they would use for people to kind of score themselves, how they're feeling. So I took that idea, and I had every patient I ever worked with, they would fill out my form. And it was, how are you feeling today in terms of pain, stress, and stomach upset, intestinal distress, the three main things that happen with people experiencing cancer. And so they would do that right before they'd have a session. It didn't matter if it was a 20-minute chairside session or a 1 hour in-office session. I wouldn't touch it. I wouldn't look at it. And then when we finished, they would report again. And so we calculated all that data. And we had enough to find that if you experienced any of those, it was statistically significant. So if you have science people listening, the probability that you would have significant improvement was P equals less than 0.0001. That's very high. I didn't know that. I'm not a mathematician, but that was very high significance, higher than opioids, higher than other pain medications. And the thing that would happen was it wasn't a one and done, it would stick with you. So over time, we would find people even continually undergoing treatment, their pain levels were decreasing, their stress levels and anxiety levels were going down. And so by the time I left, I must have had, and we didn't tabulate all of them, but I must have had over 3,000 of those. And the information about Jin Shin Jyutsu was in the medical record, in the electronic medical record. So to me, my job was to plant seeds in the medical world for the way of things to come. So that's kind of my story. I'm no longer there. I left in 2019. I was there for 10 years. After the first year and a half, the university picked up my salary, picked up the program. The program grew. We then had yoga and meditation, acupuncture, And we were in every aspect of the hospital, from beginning of life, pregnancy, to end of life, emergency, transplant, heart. I have so many stories. I could write a book. I know of hundreds of different cases of interesting things that happened. People loved it. And at any one time, there was myself and one practitioner. We would have a wait list of 40 inpatients waiting for care from us. And we would get called for things when something would go really sideways and the physicians wouldn't know what to do. They'd call us because we looked at things from just a different perspective. Now, my patients or people, I don't even like to call people patients, the people that I was working with together, because we're working together for their care, when I saw them in the hospital or in our clinic, I read as much of their medical record as I had time for before they would come in, because that told me about the history of the energy of the body. And so from there, then I would listen to where we are today. I'd listen to what they tell me, the tenor of the voice, all of that kind of traditional body reading. And that would be a starting point, because people come to these various conditions that we call diagnosis from different paths. No one is exactly the same, and that's why no treatment is effective in the same way. Some people do really well on traditional Western medications, and some people don't at all. They get every side effect in the book, me included, which is why that is not the way. My primary way of taking care of myself is through Jin Shin Jyutsu self-help and seeing a practitioner. That's what works for my body. And I think that as we're growing and changing, and we know that energy in this world is shifting massively right now. We can feel it. And there's those who can't feel it, and they can feel it, but they're afraid. They have no idea what's happening. If we've been able to have some understanding, move through, let go of the old, take in the new, we tend to do better. And these people tend to be the ones that I'm treating. And then there's the animals, that whole other aspect. Okay, that's enough for now.
Yeah, I loved what you said, that you're sitting down or you're being with the person that is requiring your help in that situation, and you said you're wondering what's going to happen. So it sounds very different than, let's say, Reiki or other healing practices. I would love for you to maybe touch upon, so let's say someone comes inside, you check their wrist. In Ayurveda, there's also that practice where the doctor checks the nadis, like how the energy flows and how the different elements flow within us. And so that's kind of how you evaluate, plus of course the history and speaking to the person. And then what is it like commonly, or what are the different ways that the different types of practices that, or different, you were talking about, for example, holding the thumbs. Can you give us more examples of just how Jin Shin Jyutsu is being applied?
So it is different. I'll speak for a moment to the Reiki piece. Jin Shin Jyutsu and Reiki were kind of discovered is the best word I can use, though it's not discovered. We have this art within us in all cultures, but they were started to be kind of written down in Japan by two men around the same time. So I've been trained in Reiki. I use it very rarely. And I probably, some Reiki masters would disagree with me, and I'm not a Reiki master. I have utilized it, but I found Jin Shin Jyutsu, and this made more sense to me. So we both think of energy as moving through the hands. In Reiki, they will talk about frequencies of energy, selecting the frequency. They have to be attuned so they can receive this energy. We don't believe you have to do any of that. It's the creator's art. Who are we to determine what must be done? it feels egoic to me. And that's where the worry and wonder come together too. When I work with someone, yes, we listen to those pulses, just as similar to Ayurvedic. I have not studied the way of doing the Ayurvedic pulse listening, but I know it's very similar. In some cultures, they call it listening to the winds. And it is the energetic pulses, where it's moving in the body, what's being burdened, where we're going, or where the individual is going. And that's a starting point. We use more than that because then we use the physical body. That tells us the solidification of the energy. I listen to people tell me about pain, where it's moving, what it feels like. Is it stagnant? Is it burning? Is it, there's so many descriptives for pain. And again, that's a descriptive as to the energy association. So that's our starting point. And then the touch is so light. And the nice thing about Jin Shin Jyutsu that's a little different than acupuncture is in acupuncture you place your needles along these pathways in these 300 plus locations determined by the various ways that they listen and check, and then they wait. But with us it's more fluid, which is one of the reasons why the animals like it. So we will have our hands in a placement, and we do these step by step for humans. Usually animals, we're only using a couple steps. They don't need us to be doing a lot. And we're listening with our fingertips, this most sensitive part of the body, though we can use our whole hand or our palm. We are not thinking about sending energy. We are not thinking about pulling energy out, moving, shifting. I have found animals don't like that so much. They don't need that. They know what they need. So with Jin Shin Jyutsu, we do none of that. We just listen, and I wait until I feel, and I can feel the shifting and changing of the densities of energy. It has different descriptives. It can feel like smoke. It can have an electrical quality. It can have a pounding. All these descriptives tell us about the energy movement through the body. And I wait until I feel this gentle pulsation that matches my left and right hand. Left hand leads a little bit. But what I noticed as I was working in the hospital setting was I would start to nod my head in this pulsation. And what I realized was that when it was in balance, it was in balance. It didn't matter if you were an infant, an elderly person, what your situation was. It was the same. It was the universal heartbeat. The universal heartbeat. So we don't send, we just listen. And when you first start, of course, you're worried. Are you doing the right thing? Is this what they need? I finally put that aside after a little bit of learning. And now I just wonder. Wonder leaves it open. Worrying closes things down. Like Meher Baba was the one in the 60s who said, don't worry, be happy. Leave the rest to me. So I don't worry, I just wonder. And that's when I can feel things start to shift. This is coming through me. Where our hands are on the body are more about, I've come to think of it more about efficiency. Hands in a placement that helps the energy of the heart. That maybe we're not working on the physical heart, maybe it's the mental, emotional, or maybe it's just that they said their little finger hurts. So there's that aspect. And my acupuncture friends will tell me that they feel that Jin Shin Jyutsu works on, and I don't understand quite what this means, but they talk about the deeper challenges, deeper channels. And to me, I think that's more of the deep mental, emotional aspects, the lifetimes, the generational aspects, the deep traumas, the deep shifting, or what in different practices, I'm not talking about health practices, the sanskaras, the threads, the tangles, the experiences that are coming to be untangled in this lifetime if we are in that unwinding phase. And so now that's not Jin Shin Jyutsu, that's Jennifer Bradley's Pondering the Universe. But we do talk about it in Jin Shin Jyutsu. We talk about the left side as being generational energies, that coming through. I think about the ovum of the individual in front of me. That ovum was in their mother when their mother was being formed in their mother. So that's the energy of generations. It's a vibratory quality. So there's things that we're working on that aren't even ours. And there are practices, and this isn't Jin Shin Jyutsu, that talks about the change you make for you. It's so important. We are affecting this says, and I think it's even deeper, the 7 generations before us and the 7 generations to come. And that can even be the 7 generations within our lifetime, our infant self, our in utero self, our infant self, our toddler, our young adolescent self, our older self, every bit in between. We are harmonizing this. So, I don't know.
It's such a beautiful, deep understanding of the not just human psyche, but even with all life forms, is that we have to look deeper. And it helps me, like listening to you right now, I get a deeper understanding of having acceptance for when somebody around me doesn't act in the way that I expect them to, or that I think is the right way to behave, to understand that that might not be them. That might be generational behavior, trauma, memory playing out, and I shouldn't be thinking that this is who they are. They're bad, or whatever. And even with animals, this is something that me and my wife were actually wondering about, and that's a question that she had for you, because our dog grew up as a street dog, and her mother was hunting, so she would hunt something and bring it to my wife's door to give it to her daughter, who's our dog.
Who's your dog?
Yes, and our dog kind of used our home as I'll come when I want and I'll leave when I want. But she started to develop a relationship with my wife's family, and her mother at some point died, and her brother died as well, and her brother actually died by a car accident, and she saw it. And so she carries a lot of trauma from that situation, and it's connected to our street because she still lives here. And so my wife was wondering, how can we release this trauma that is related to a specific place, a specific environment?
This is great. So you brought up a number of different things to think about. Number one is this interconnectedness of beings, this family of dogs. When people are breeding dogs, they just willy-nilly take the puppy away from the mother, send it off to another area, and never think about how traumatic that might be. So these dogs have had agency in some ways. I've worked with street dogs from India before. And the fact that you recognize that the dog in your care was still connected to its mother, still connected to its family and its way of being. And you all said, I see that. I recognize that. It isn't like, no, you're my dog now. I'm going to chain you up because this is where you belong. You gave that dog agency. And then the traumatic instance of the brother dog being hit by a car, some people would say, they're dogs. They don't understand. Dogs don't have, animals don't have feelings or consciousness. Their consciousness might be slightly different than ours. In some ways, it can be very much more expanded than ours. And so that was a traumatic event. And there is this, we can go into science, brain synapse structure ties that story in because it will say street here dangerous, street here dangerous. And that's that connector. It's a safety, it's a way of creating safety, but it also can become out of balance, that it's beyond that then it becomes debilitating. So we have a light touch hold that we use, and I'll share this with you. These 26 locations have numbers, so you probably heard me talk about that. But I'll just describe. I like to use the right side of the body. Remember we said left was generational, right is right now. We're working on something that was experienced in this lifetime, but we're also untangling something within this lifetime, meaning it could be something from generations ago. I like to work on the right side. So I take one hand, and with animals, we don't care which hand we're using. I put one hand on the side of, you'll follow their neck down to the shoulder. Now their shoulder is at an angle, right? Because they're living on the horizontal plane where we're on the vertical. Ours is like a shelf. It's that place you might touch in and it feels tender. Or if you go for massage therapy, they'll say, "Ooh, it's a little tight there." This is where we carry our burdens. And our burdens can bring us down. And when this doesn't work, this location, it's like a fulcrum. Think of that with a rope on either side. When it gets stuck, nothing can change. It's difficult to breathe, there's tension. So we always are very interested in this energetic location. And the other one is on the same side. So if he was sitting or standing, you're going to follow the rib cage up on the right-hand side where the rib cage meets the spine on that same side of the body. So we've got one hand on the shoulder, we have the other hand on the back, kind of right by the spine where the rib cage is. Now these locations are the size of your dog's paw. Pretty hard for us to miss. We don't try to pinpoint, this is not acupuncture. Our hand just lays in trust that we're in the right space. Meanwhile, while we're doing this, I'm talking to them. I'm saying, I understand you had this situation that happened and it was a deep loss and I'm so sorry. I'm going to put my hand somewhere that I think may help you if you're ready to move through. Not to forget, because we never forget. You know, our traumatic experiences are also our teachers, right? So one hand, and then we watch. Now, if sometimes street dogs, and this one's been with you for a while, so is trusting for you and your wife, this may be easy for you to do. Hands very, very light. And then what I always like to add is, you know, we exhale. Big sigh. And let go of our expectation of what's going to happen. And I just keep talking to them in my mind, saying, if I'm not in the right place, if this isn't what you want, move away from me. And we watch a lot of body language. What are the ears doing? If they're tucked back and we get that big-eyed look, we remove our hands and say, I saw that. That was a lot. Especially horses, I do that. I saw that. I'm going to give you a minute. You show me when you're ready and what you might like. But we can do this while they're lying in our lap, in a relaxed time, and just wait to see what happens. Watch the changing in the breathing. It might get rapid and slow. There might be a big sigh. Watch and feel the tissue start to change as the structure melts. So this one at the neck I told you is about burdens. The one where the rib cage meets the spine is the only pair, remember there's matching on either side, the only pair that has to do with the stuck emotion or attitude, as we call it, of fear. And in Jin Shin Jyutsu, it's what is fear? False evidence that appears to be real. And the other name for this location is my destiny. So think of it. We release the burdens and we move into our destiny. And that location is the location of fight, flight, freeze. So when animals are in that, this is usually because this is stuck and there's a lot of body tension. And then there's these relationships that you see in Ayurvedic, right? Of anger, control, fearful dogs may be aggressive. It's really fear. The underlying cause is fear. So much going on. And with our compassionate selves, our very light touch, and our patience, we do this. And sometimes I call it tea and toast. A little here, a little there. You might start with one hand and let them move and shift, because they might say, that's not quite it. Let's put your hands here. But that one, I had learned that particular hold in my class, and it's not in our animal, but we have a Jin Shin Jyutsu for your animal companions book. It's not in there. I learned that from my work in the hospital. I was working with cancer patients, and this was one that we used for a detox. And I was helping a woman who had been stage 4 cancer, really, really intensive pain, had been on pill form morphine. I worked with her frequently. Her pain was lessening, as we talked about before. And she decided she wanted to stop taking the pill morphine. She tried it before. You know, it's an opioid. Withdrawal from those can be intense and severe, and she couldn't do it. So with her oncologist, we sat down. He created a titration schedule. I treated her twice a week for an hour each time, only with this hold. And she was able to titrate off of the morphine successfully, no side effects. Well, when you work in a hospital, that gets around. People talk a lot. And the next thing I knew, I had them call me in the NICU, so for this infants who were struggling. And this was an infant who was also on morphine, had had many, many surgeries because of the way it came into the world. It needed a lot of surgeries, and they were unable to titrate the baby off of morphine. It also had this condition. So I worked with that infant, came down off the morphine, everything's great. And I worked with the natal abstinence syndrome. The babies who had been in utero had experienced different opioids or, different drugs of whatever the mother had been using for her trauma. And so, there we go. And so when I started, but then I was working with pregnant women on Suboxone, which is one of the things they use here for people trying to get off of opioids, trying to help their babies, trying to make a change. And I started doing this for these women, and we were working mostly on things like nausea and things to help them through their pregnancy process. But the ladies started telling me that they noticed that trauma, that back there, which is why people use, because they're trying to calm the mind, it's all energy, was starting to lessen. It was softer. It didn't go away completely, but they weren't getting constantly triggered. So what does that tell me? It tells me that brain synapse structure is changing. And it wasn't just, and then when you stopped, it all came back. Energy wants to come into balance. It's like a river that's out of balance. You do something, it starts to get in balance, but then it says, yeah, but I'm kind of used to being this way, right? So gradually. And then the part, that's the self-help aspect where we work on ourselves, I would give them that. But that was how I realized the trauma part. And then I started applying it to animals and found it to be really, really powerful.
Maybe
so you guys try that.
The last thing, yeah, absolutely. We'll definitely try that. And I think one thing that I want to clarify for the audience, can anyone apply Jin Shin Jyutsu to themselves, or is it something that requires a trained practitioner?
You can go to a trained practitioner, but the self-care, or what we call self-help aspect, can be done by anyone at all. And, I don't know if you have a way of doing this. One of my favorite things, if I could teach people anything, we teach how to hold the fingers related to our strong or stuck emotions, attitudes. That is extremely powerful, extremely powerful. If I could teach one thing to everyone, this is the thing. I have a handout that I share with people all over the world. I can give one little tip if you want. Okay. So each one represents a different stuck emotion or attitude. Worry is one we think of a lot. There's a lot of worriers. People twiddle their thumbs. But we say we get rid of worry fast, easy to remember. Index finger is fear. It's the only finger we use to point as a gun or to push people away. Get back, that's fear. So that inner anxiety people are feeling right now, that they don't even know if it's theirs. And then middle finger, in the States, this is the anger finger anyway. I know different cultures have different things that they use. Index finger is about anger and about control, because if you can't control the situation, people get angry. Ring finger, sadness, and so people who are very teary, emotional, this one helps. Now, it doesn't stop these emotions. We're meant to have these emotions. It helps the body get back into the flow. And because that's how we experience life. And it's why people who are given medications for their overloaded emotions, or what people might call psychosis, they feel numb. And it's really hard to live in a numb world. We're meant to be in the flow. And then the pinky finger, it's a T for fast, and that's the try-tos, trying to be perfect, trying to do everything right, self-criticism. And it's also the finger that the physical energy of the heart goes through. And so it can be also another anger that we call anger of the heart, because most people who have an intensive heart attack 48 hours before have had an explosive, angry event. And it's usually related to family and relationships, anger of the heart. So when we just know this, and I teach this to school children, we can help ourselves tremendously in so many different ways. And I teach people before they work on their animals, check in with themselves, how am I feeling? Because they feel you, right? Okay, I'm a little nervous about what I'm doing. I'll just hold my index finger, put it in my lap. Big sigh. I'm totally into the sighs. That's my new thing. Let go of that. Any emotion that happens. Doesn't matter. You're going to naturally gravitate to the one you enjoy, and it is not based on whether you write or utilize your right hand more than your left. It can vary. And then just wait. Lightly, you should be able to drop your finger out. And then exhale. You can drop your head and shoulders. Your eyes do not need to be closed. Some people, that's difficult to do. And just wait. It can be dramatic. So for the people here who have difficulty sleeping, they might wake up in the middle of the night, they're thinking, they're worried. Do not get on your telephone. Get up, use the bathroom, take your medicine, whatever it is you usually do, jump into bed, and now let's shake hands with ourselves. Light touch. I like to go down in here. There is an energetic center here that has to do with the personality. Acupressure puts pressure here for headaches. This also helps headaches, but you do not need pressure. You do not, two wires close together, the energy travels between, right, before they even touch. Light touch, lay it in your lap, however you're comfortable. It's similar to a baby sucking its thumb. It helps with worry, and worry we know affects digestion. And then what people find is that in a couple of minutes, they'll start to feel dozy, they'll roll over, hands will part, and they'll go back to sleep. If it's something like insomnia or people taking steroids for cancer treatment, we have a little bit of a different thing that we do. But for general sleeplessness, getting back to sleep, going to sleep, this makes a huge difference. And I don't know if you all have children, but children will report in the mornings before school, I can't go to school, my stomach hurts. And it really, really, truly does. They are telling you the truth. But really, the underlying cause is they're worried about something at school. A test, maybe they're being bullied, something's happening there. They don't want to go. And so you say, okay, darling, you can stay home. And suddenly they're better because you have relieved the problem. But was it true what they were telling you? Absolutely. Was it affecting their stomach and digestion? Absolutely. So I didn't know this when I had my kids when they were little, I would now have them hold their thumb for a couple of minutes and then we go off to school. So I teach these to the kids so they keep a little card in their backpack and they use it at home. And so it's for everybody. So that would be my one tip. There's many, many more. And the touch that we use for the animals, these simple one hand here, for humans, the self-care is the aspect that has been translated for use with the animals, because the animals like simple. The animals don't need a big step-by-step. We don't have to appear busy. They shift and change quicker than we do. They have many less layers on them. And this is not Jin Shin Jyutsu, this is more Meher Baba. He talks about the layers of consciousness of, the many, many, many incarnations that we've had, starting from the gas form to stone and through all the animal, plant, and animal kingdom, through the human consciousness. That's a lot of stuff. That's a lot of layers. So we can do this on dogs, cats, horses, pigs, goats. I have treated bumblebees before. I have treated insects. It's fun. It's so much fun. So we can do this. This is for all beings through the Creator.
Where can people find you, or how can people connect to you if they would like to?
Oh, great. Thank you. Well, I always say the dog people have taken over my Instagram account, but I do teach about humans things now too. But I am on Instagram and I'm on Facebook, but mostly it's Instagram. And it's at Jennifer Bradley JSJ, Jin Shin Jyutsu. And so you can find me there. And I teach every week. I do a live every week to talk to people, like that was how we met. You attended one of those where I answer questions. I like to do that because I know we all come from different economic abilities, and I'm here in Kentucky and people are everywhere. I like to give the opportunity for people to learn in lots of different ways. I have a website, jbradleyjsj.com. It gives more information about Jin Shin Jyutsu. And I also do mentoring one-to-one on the self-care or the animal care online on Zoom. So, and I have clients in India. I've worked with dogs in ashrams. I have worked with people who are using even the Ayurvedic and some of the traditional Western, and they needed something else. The self-care aspect has sparked and created a magnificent change. It's just caught my attention. I never will stop learning and growing, and so I hope that this will give your listeners the thought of, maybe I'll check that out. Maybe even if everyone just held their thumb, we stopped worrying. Imagine how much calmer the world would be. Yeah.
Jennifer, this has been an incredibly insightful conversation. The reminder that healing is available to all of us, whether through touch, presence, or awareness. It's something truly powerful. For those who are listening right now, if this conversation resonated with you, let us know in the comments, share your thoughts, and most importantly, take what you've learned today, explore it in your own life, and stay open, stay curious, stay connected. Thank you, Jennifer.
Absolutely. Thank you. And that's so true. This may not resonate with someone in this moment, but they might find this recording how many years from now, and it is the right moment. Everything is in its own natural timing. So thank you, Stephen, for the opportunity to be with you. I really appreciate it.
Yes, yes. And if people have questions, I encourage them to check out your Instagram. I think you also have a course, right, where you teach people how to use these things. So I do also recommend that. As I mentioned before, I did see changes. I was working mostly with our dog, or dogs in general, but now I'm becoming more curious about the human part, because it seems like such a tremendous opportunity to reduce the suffering in this world. So yeah.
And so I'll suggest for you a book that you might like just for a general idea of Jin Shin Jyutsu, and that includes the self-care aspect. And it's a book called Touch of Healing, and it's written by Alice Burmeister. I am fortunate enough to know her family and have met her, but this is the general aspect of what this is. Talks all about it, but also starts to give some self-care information for things you can try for yourself. And then there are 3 self-help books, book 1, book 2, book 3, on self-care, that you can use that. And for Jin Shin Jyutsu for animals, there is a book written by Adele Leese. She is the teacher that I learned from and studied with, and I'm sharing that information, plus my knowledge of Jin Shin Jyutsu working with humans. And her book is called Jin Shin Jyutsu for Your Animal Companions. So lots of resources out there if it strikes you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks so much for the opportunity to be here today. It was great.
You're welcome.